And then, sorry.
No, just
93, 4?
That was
you
in
guys.
93.
So 94, you started sharing the drive, not just running two cars. Because there was a point, wasn't there, in the BMWs where you and
No, that was
John,
95.
that was 5. Okay.
So that was when we went to the supercar. So
Yeah.
again, the same story. Supercar, a lot more expensive. We sold the BMWs. We sold John's car to a chap in Western Australia for $31,000. Sorry about the guys who've just bought them for $500,000. And we sold my car with a spare engine to Justin Matthews for $39,000.
And he put it in the Super Touring, didn't he?
Correct, yeah. So we sold both the cars in 95 over the Christmas break. Did a deal with Larry.
Was that the first option to go to Larry?
Yeah, well, back then, if you remember, Larry was running an enormous amount of customer stuff. He was really the only one doing customer
Engines
and cars.
Yeah.
And a lot of the other guys were very tight-lipped about what went on. I went down to Melbourne, sat down with Larry, had a frank and open conversation.
Fairly frank and fairly open.
And, well, two boys from the country.
Yeah.
And we discovered that we could actually speak the same language.
Yeah.
Most of it blue and inappropriate. So but I mean, we'd known Larry for a long time, obviously, in the pits with the BMWs.
Yeah.
So this was, we'd started that in 89.
Yeah.
And, now we're at 95. So,
Yeah.
Although we hadn't been, drinking buddies, we, obviously knew him.
Yeah.
And when we sat down, one of those things in the frank and honest conversation was that he said, well, listen, Cock, I'll sell you this car. He said, and if you take it away and you leave it as it is and you can't say that word with him, I will help you.
Yeah.
He said, if you take it away and you make it faster by yourself and you fiddle with it, not only can I not help you, I won't help you.
Yeah.
And I said, mate, I like your logic because that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yep.
We'll do exactly that.
Yeah.
You don't want to reinvent the wheel, do you?
No, and of course, those guys again, whether it was, Barry or Larry himself, just enormous amount of help to us. And even today, we still have, Simon and Bob, through the automotive workshop, still have PE 044.
Yeah.
Which was 2006 Jack Daniels car, etc.,
Yeah.
etc. It's still in total Perkins spec.
Yeah.
Nothing's been changed on it, but now the world's moved on, and we now talk with Barry and Jack.
Yeah.
But we didn't change the cars, we didn't do anything, and it was an awesome arrangement where, Baz would just say, when you get to Bathurst, put these springs in it, do this, do that, watch out, raise it, 2 turns, watch out on fuel tanks, fuel tanks, we'll do this, that and the other. And anytime, we carried very few spare parts other than our wheels and a few odds and sods.
Yeah.
But if we broke anything, we just rocked into Larry's truck and signed the invoice and carried it back out the other side.
Yeah.
And there's a few doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it worked brilliantly.
And that period led to you guys getting the Gatorade sponsorship, which was a good deal for a privateer team at that time. Like, it really showcased you guys.
I must say, I think one of the best looking cars ever, but I'm probably a bit biased. That was the fault or the responsibility or, and I'm only saying this tongue in cheek, Joanne Gardner, who was our marketing person at the time, same thing, woman who come along, or young girl in those days, who loved motorsport and loved cars, and she was from sort of a marketing background. And the sponsorship come around principally through a bet, where she'd contacted the managing director of Gatorade Australia, who's a nice fella too, now lives in the States and got a beer company, I think.
Can't be a bad bloke.
Yeah.
Gary's like, we're looking for
David
a sponsor.
Knight, he's going right over there. And she was trying to get through to David that you sponsor all these people in triathlons and marathons and all the rest of it, But the reality is that race car drivers have a higher need for rehydration, etc., and it's a more demanding sport than all of them.
Yeah.
And he was like, rubbish.
Yeah.
You know, Gatorade was very big in NASCAR in America.
Yep.
Yeah.
So he kind of already had a bit of a push from that side. And it come down to a bet where Joe said, I bet you that race car drivers have a higher demand on their rehydration needs than do any other person in the sport, in any other form of sport.
Yeah.
And the bet was that if she was right, you'd sponsor us.
Yeah.
And he got onto his, because in America they've got basically universities that Gatorade run and stuff, and got onto them, and they said, no, actually, she's pretty damn close.
Yeah.
A NASCAR driver is a very close second to a marathon runner.
Yeah, right.
And he sort of gave in and said, all right, let's give this stuff a go.
Yeah.
It wasn't a huge amount of money. A lot of people were surprised at how good a job we did for the money we got.
And that was a wrap as well?
No, it wasn't a wrap. That's a lot of people think it was a wrap. It was a green car with every
stickers, wasn't it?
Yeah, other than the green car, everything on it was a sticker, whether it be numbers, advertising, Gatorade signage, but even the bubbles were stickers. And what they were clear stickers that had like a dark outline of dots, and where the shine was, there was like a white patch in the middle. And there were 5 different stickers. So there were 4 different size bubbles, and one which we affectionately call the snot dribble. And
for obvious reasons.
We just stuck them on the car. And the thing, when we were doing it, John Cotter was literally just standing back saying, no, you're starting to form a pattern. Because your brain tried to stick them on in, little, big, and he's like, no, pull that one off, you got it wrong. So we eventually become very skilled at not making patterns. And I must say, when we rolled that car out at Eastern Creek for the test day, everybody without exception in the whole motor racing fraternity just went, wow.
Yeah.
That looks amazing.
I mean, it still stands up now when you see it on coverage, and like you go back and watch the old races, and you think that thing really, like, I think even today's grid it would stand out as a pretty impressive car. Like the colour combination works, of course, that's their corporate branding, so they know it works. But even just the stickering and how you guys presented it just definitely worked, didn't it?
And a funny little story to that was that Gatorade had got their marketing company involved at the time, and God bless marketing people, but they'd come up with all these little stickers like this to put all over it, you know. And they came out to the workshop one day and, here we are, Dad, I put them on, here's the trials here. I said, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
I said, what do you mean? I said, you won't see that on TV.
Yeah.
Anyway, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, pulled the bond off the car, stuck a whole heap of them in, and they said, oh, it looks amazing. And I said, you're right, it does look amazing from a metre. Now let's come out here, and walked out the workshop, across the car park, and I said, now have a look at it.
Yeah.
They said, it just looks like a dirty bonnet, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I said, yep. I said, we don't need the stickers 1 inch diameter, we need them 6 inches diameter.
Yeah.
So they went away and did that and come back, and I was like, how good does this look? Yeah. So that was where it all started. But interestingly, it looked like $1 million deal, and it was nothing like it. It was a little more than 10% of that, which nobody ever believed us because it just looked like it.
So good, yeah.
But half the teams were like, you guys are legends, congratulations. The other half, 6 phone calls a day to Gatorade.
Yeah, trying to.
How can we backdoor these guys? How can we backdoor these
Yeah.
guys?
Yeah.
And if they knew the truth. And Gatorade, to their credit, just kept hanging up on them.
Yeah.
Right, we talk about pinching sponsorships. I can always remember being at Winton one day, and a couple of the V8 Ute guys, the Brute days, saying, we're sick and tired of these the development series guys coming down trying to pinch our sponsors. And then you're up in the development series paddock and saying, we're sick and tired of the supercar guys coming down trying to pinch our sponsors. So it's a dog-eat-dog world.
I mean, it
Dog eat
still,
dog,
still
and-
goes on, doesn't it? Like
Yeah,
it still
of
is
course.
just- yeah.
One particular guy whose name I won't mention, But he was so brazen, he actually come into our pit and sat down out the back in the tent with the Gatorade guys and tried to pinch him while he was sitting in our pit.
Really?
Wow. That's insane.
So now we're going to jump on to the Privateer series, I guess. That's the next stage.
You mean as in the
Within the
Goodyear
supercars?
series?
No, within the supercars
Oh, within-
with the Gatorade car.
Yep.
So, sorry, just before we jump into that.
Yep.
That was that period where in 97 it rebranded as V8 Supercars and it became a lot more corporate. Like it definitely made that step into this is now professional sport and all the teams are expected to be professional, not just you can turn up and try to win Bathurst because it looks easy sort of thing.
The Rex and all that came in.
How did that feel to be part of the industry through that period? Because of course you would have known all these people as well. You say talking to Perkins and talking to, Frank Gardner and all that pre this, where there was probably a lot more willingness to share information or pass parts on or whatever. How did that feel as it started to transition into that more corporate world and people were really pushing the envelope, but I guess trying to stay a bit private as well?
Yeah, I think it had already changed before that.
Yeah.
I mean, going back to just probably to put you in the picture when we had Tiga and Supercars, but there was Tiga before that. And probably what a lot of people don't know is that I'm going to have a guess because old age and memory, but I think there are only 10 or maybe a dozen original owners of that, of which John Cotter and Peter Doulman, M3 Motorsport, were one of the original owners of I think it was Tiga.
Entrance Group?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And which became V8 Supercars, and then we had the Level 1, the Level 2 and the Level 3 franchises associated with that. But when it moved into that professional era, and at the risk of, sort of blowing our own trumpet, I think then we were probably one of the most professional, best presented teams in the show.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, and again, I hear this from a lot of people when they say, oh yeah, but you guys had all that Gatorade money, no wonder you were such a well-presented team and everybody had uniforms and, there was all this corporate presence and this professionalism and all the rest of it. And it wasn't true. It was just something we'd pushed very hard to get. We were probably one of the worst funded teams in the whole show, but we knew that presentation and all that important commercial side of it, again through Joe Gardner, who was very much onto that, was super important. So, at the time, I would argue that we were probably certainly in the top 5.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about of the whole shooting match.
Yeah.
Professionally presented teams.
Yeah. Did it get obviously it did, but did it get harder financially as well as they, introduced more races and more effects of you need to travel, you need to be on it, you need to be constantly doing things? So it just got hard.
That was, in the end, that was the reason we stopped.
Yeah.
The money we're getting from Gatorade, and again, John and I were sort of 50-50 supporting the business out of our own pockets. But yeah, it did take a step up where, you couldn't run a car for $250,000 back in those days, but we run a car for less than that, considerably less than that. And I remember speaking to one of the other privateers who did it probably in a very similar level to us, and we had a conversation one night over a beer, and I told him how much we're spending, and he said, I don't believe you. Yeah. He said, I just spent $550,000 last year.
Yeah.
So, it was... but that was when we got out, because it just got out at that point where we couldn't run anymore.
You used to get the Privateers Cup. That was in that period, wasn't it? There was a Privateer where they ran a separate race for you guys, like before the main race.
Yeah, they used to have the top 6 shootout, and then the Privateers Cup as well, and then the 2 races which you were involved in.
Did that actually help with sponsors or anything like that, or was that just more like you sort of felt like you were being, in some regards, like you look at it now and you go, it kind of made the privateers run even more miles, which doesn't really help them do the whole season, you know?
I don't know. I think at the time we certainly thought it helped us with profile because it was televised.
Yeah.
And of course, back in the day, you tried to sell everything to your sponsor on how much TV time you were getting.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think at the time we looked at it in a fairly positive way.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a, unfortunately, it was like a race that was run on Saturday afternoon. It was a bit of a panel crushing fest.
Yeah.
Because I think, well, everyone thought, if I win this race, I'm going to look good, aren't I?
Yeah.
So, yeah, they probably pushed a whole lot harder in that race than they normally would.
Do you have separate points? Just trying to recall where there was separate points towards the end of the year.
There was a privateers. I think it was a privateers cup. And I know at Bathurst, the reason I know at Bathurst is in 97 or 97, I won it. So there was also a pole position privateer at Bathurst.
Yep.
And as I say, the only reason I know that is I got the trophy.
The other thing to think about, of course, because of, after that, it sort of ended you guys sort of didn't continue on with the supercars and that sort of thing because it just got too expensive. But, like, you were involved with the BMW where you started and then the supercar where you finished, one of the, like, probably most transformative periods of motorsport in this country with how it evolved from what it was with touring cars you could effectively buy and purchase and run yourself, but also some of the most iconic moments that everybody thinks of with Bathurst there. Like, you were part of the 92 race that sort of had all the wild drama. You were there for, 97, which was probably one of the biggest Bathurst events ever with Brock's final year full time. What was it like to sort of now reflect and see that, like, you can go, I experienced that and I can experience that iconic moment people talked about and that one I was there and I know it from this angle. Must be pretty interesting to sort of sit there and go, yeah, I saw that,
It's strange, and I think people, as they get older, will probably understand what I'm saying, that you look back at a lot of things in your life and you think, did I do that? I mean, surely not. I mean, as a complete aside, I remember at 13, my dad would take me to work on the farm. We didn't live on the farm. He'd drop me off with my lunch and my esky, and he'd go back into town and go to his day job, which he was a public servant. And, he'd drop me off at sort of 6 in the morning and come back and pick me up at 6 at night. I'd be on the farm 100% by myself, spraying fruit trees with a tractor, ploughing fields, and it's like, and you look at a 13-year-old now and you think, no, they shouldn't be in charge of machinery. They shouldn't be in charge of machinery by himself, and they shouldn't be 20 miles out of town by themselves, I
didn't think of that thought never entered anyone's head back in those days.
No, so then you come forward to your question and, like the young guys at work will be saying, oh, well, what did you do such and such? And you start to tell them the story and I actually stop and think, am I actually exaggerating this, or is this how it actually was? And you got to then tell the story of how it actually was. And you look back, I look back now and think, wow, that was pretty amazing. But at the time it was what you did.
You didn't think twice about it. But that also reflects now the days with the race suits on pit crew, helmets, the whole bit. None of that existed back in the day.
No, and in fact, people don't believe me when I tell them the story that there used to be no speed limit in pit lane, and it was considered part of the racetrack. And I posted a photo a while back on Facebook or somewhere of me leaving the pits during the very first endurance race at Oran Park, which escapes me, about 1990. And you can clearly see it's the pits from the way the photo's been taken, by a crew member or someone, and there's just smoke pouring off the back tyres, and it's completely sideways. I'm still in pit lane. And I used to again say to people that we'd always be up the top end of pit lane at Bathurst, and you had to be very careful if you crossed to the wall to see what was going on, because DJR and all those guys who were down the bottom end, they were ripping third
Warp
gear in
speed.
the Sierra by the time they went past you, and like, that's probably 200 kilometres an hour. You're saying you remember back on stories, and although this is motor racing stories, unrelated but a bit funny, that we were racing at Wanneroo with the BMWs, and we'd run out of rags. You know, you take a bag of rags to mop up things. Yep. We'd had a couple of oil spills, and all the rags were covered in oil and all the rest of it. And one of the guys in the race team, who still helps me with the Formula Holden, actually, he said, "No, that's all right. We'll just take them home and wash them." So we went back to this apartment we had at Wanneroo, and it was one of those little twin tub things, right?
Yeah.
And he just chucked all the rags in, a bag of rags, and thought, well, they're really dirty, so I'll need a lot more detergent, like half a packet of detergent. And we went to dinner, and when we come back home, the laundry, you could see soap bubbles under the door. I don't know what's gone on here. And he opened the door, and I kid you not, it was waist height in soap suds, the whole room. Then you think back and go, that really happened? It's
it did happen. So you guys finished up with supercars, sold the car, I assume, and decided to go do something else, or
no?
Like, what was the genesis of that progression?
We had 2 supercars. Our first supercar was the car that Jack's now restoring, PE 019, and it was a VP when we got it, and Larry had got third at Bathurst. Larry and Greg Hansford got third at Bathurst in 93 in that car. No, sorry.
94.
No, it was the winner. 94 in that car. Yep. We got it 95. And we'd converted that car to a VS along the way. Then we sold that one, some guys in Melbourne, and we bought a VT, which was actually, off Larry, which was actually his first ever VT. So Larry built the first VT, him and HRT at the time.
Yeah, so that car would have been almost a debut at Calder
yes.
when Lowndes had the crash there.
Yes.
If maybe, or yes. Very close to that time.
Very close to that. I
and
know
Ingle drove it? Ingle would have, Russell
Ingle, that's right.
Yep.
Russell drove it.
Yep.
Just back on PE 019, our VP, it was also leased, by the way, I should add. But when we got to the VT, we ran it. Bob McDonald's always been a great mate, a great friend, and one of the best human beings on earth. But he's an accountant by trade, but he's a bit of a mathematical genius, so he can just keep rolling through numbers a bit like a computer. And we raced at the Clipsal 500 in the, what would have been the VS at the time, in the Gatorade car, which I drove. And I can't remember where we come, but, we're down there somewhere in the mid-pack. And Bob was our strategist. He'd been helping us for many years, but he helped us with strategy and all that sort of stuff, which come to him very naturally. And after the race, he said to me, you just need a faster car. And I said, oh, yeah, well, yeah. ask a race driver, right? And he said, no, what I mean is, he said, your lap times for that whole race didn't vary by more than, 0.3 of a second or something per lap. He said, you were by far the most consistent driver in that race, just you didn't have the car speed. And it's like, oh, well, that's nice, whatever. So obviously he's gone home and thought about all that, and he said, no, we'll just get a new car. And it's like, he goes, no, I'll get a new car, you guys can drive it for me. So long story short, the VT we had was actually owned by Bob.
Yeah, okay.
So it was never actually owned by us. And then when we stopped racing, obviously we had the car, and then Bob thought, well, I got this car, can't be that hard, just got to Bathurst, win the race, It's like 1989 all over again.
I've seen you just stay in the car, you're right.
Was that the car he crashed at Wakefield?
Correct, yeah. So Bob ran in the Konica series, it was in those days.
Yep.
And had a bit of a shunt at Wakefield. And
that was coming out of turn 10 hit the wall.
Onto the main straight. Hit the tyre wall there. Which was a bit disappointing anyway, fortunately. The car, it had a lot of damage to it. We repaired it.
And he survived. That's the most
and
fortunate
he was fine. He didn't hurt himself, so that was a wonderful thing. But we made that joke twice now about, let's just rock up to Bathurst and how hard can it be? Probably one of the reasons we got caught up in this whole deal and struggled to give it up was that in 1989, when we did go to Bathurst in the M3s, and we'd only had them for a couple of months, we'd done a couple of AMSCAR races at Amaroo, and then, let's go to Bathurst, how hard can it be,
Yeah.
Well, we won the class. Yeah. And it wasn't through
Not good to do that first time out.
Well, and it wasn't because we were particularly fast. There were a lot of fast cars there, but we knew historically if we went there, stayed out of trouble, kept our noses clean, and finished the race, we'd probably do all right. And we did exactly that, So, unfortunately, that's where we lost the plot because we were actually wrong. How hard could it be? We went there and we won the class. It's like, right, what's next?
Yeah,
exactly.
Let's try and win out
but you see that a fair bit at Bathurst though as well. Like people go up there and win or do very well first time out, and then they'll have 15, 20, 25 years where just no result because
some of them are just so disappointing. Like we had a really fast car with the VT in the Gatorade year.
Yeah.
And I think on the second or third lap, the fiberglass panel in the front, there used to be a panel that separated the air intake from the radiator intake, and that fiberglass flap broke and fell down in front of the radiator and just cooked the engine within a lap, because it just got no air. So, that could have been, could have been, would have been, definitely a top 10 finish and probably better than that because by that time, not only had we, got to be better organised and stuff, but, we're starting to show a bit of pace,
A good car under you as well.
Yeah, and a Larry car, So, and then I think in 92, 91, I had a rose joint, which would be the equivalent to bottom ball joint, break on the second last lap at turn one. I went straight in the fence. So we'd done, one lap short of finishing the race and just, rose joint let go.
Cheers, It's crazy how that stuff happens though. Like that track does.
So you've left the supercar thing behind. Said that was it. What do you do now?
Well, no. What happened then was that. So that was 2000, I think. 2001. I think it was Peter Brock rang me, and he said, "We're going to run James." In a car at Bathurst, and obviously somebody told him that we'd stopped, and he said, "I just need a super reliable co-driver who can go out there, practice the car, get it done, make sure it's good, and kind of let James run in it." I said, "Oh yeah, sure, why not? That sounds like a bit of fun." So I went to Calder and tested the car, and the car was actually Thomas's Mezzera's car when he was running for Mike Emery.
That was that multicoloured thing that changed colours. Was it that car?
No, it was just a white one. It was a Denistron car.
Dennis, that's right. It was the one after the...
And Thomas had got bumped up to race for HRT.
Yep.
And the car sort of become available, and that's how it all happened.
Was that when it was going to be in the Euro car?
It ended up in Eurocar colours.
Yep.
And I'm not really sure... I must say I can't even remember, let alone I'm not sure. But anyway, long story short, Steve Owen ended up driving with James that year. And Steve's fabulous. Steve Owen's probably one of the best drivers that never got a top drive in supercars, in my view.
Yeah.
He was good. He is a good steerer.
Yeah.
And that never happened. And then at the last minute, a deal happened with John Faulkner. So I ended up running with John Faulkner that year, and what was it? That was 2001. Yeah, 2001. And yeah, anyway, I stuck it in the wall trying to save a bloke's life, and long story short, he's still alive, and I crashed the car. But anyway, it's how it works out.
But you're glad you did it?
Yeah, of course I'm glad I did it. But, it would have been nice to get a phone call and say, "Thanks, Pete, that was going to hurt." And in fact, without dramatising it too much because I don't want to, but there was an almost identical incident where a guy died,
I
and
remember that, yeah.
it was the same incident all over again.
Yeah, that was top of the mountain, wasn't it?
Yeah, I guess
Going into McPhillamy Park.
Yeah,
It was about 100 metres earlier, but it was exactly the same scenario. I suppose I might as well recount it. We'd had a safety car. I was stuck behind Marcus Ambrose for some reason, and we had a quick car. John had qualified the car very quick. We were looking pretty flash.
Yeah.
I don't know that we were necessarily outright, but we were probably potential podium. We'd had a safety car, restart on the safety car, so, restart. Got to the top of the hill. Marcus was holding me up for some reason. I'm not sure why, whether we just had a car that was in a better phase and his wasn't.
At the stage of the race or whatever.
Yeah, what have
Tyre
you.
life, etc., etc.
And as we come up under the bridge at Reed Park, I'm sort of all over him trying to look for anywhere to get round, and he stayed to the left, obviously me not knowing why he'd stayed to the left, and I thought, he's just moved a bit, and just as I pulled out beside him, here is Michael Donoher parked at 90 degrees, driver's door to the oncoming traffic.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I think someone had tapped him and spun him. But anyway, long story short, I'm kind of there. Marcus is there, parked car here, and all I can see is the driver looking at me like, really?
Yeah.
And I thought, I've got to get out of here. So anyway, I flicked it sideways. My quarter panel ended up hitting his quarter panel, which then flicked me into the Armco. So I guess at the time it looked, like I was a bit of a dick because I'd crashed a fast car, but the reality was that...
you can't anticipate that sort of thing, especially at that area of the track. Like, it's blind.
It's blind.
All the way across the top there. Like, people who haven't been there, even in a road car, don't realise,
Had Marcus just been pressing a little harder, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to try and pull out.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway.
Were you running other series alongside this happening?
No, but about that time, we'd bought Grant a Formula Ford.
Yeah.
So I sort of switched from, whatever you call it, part-time professional enthusiast race car driver to mini bike dad.
Yeah.
We had a kart for Grant prior to that, and we did a few test days and stuff in it, but we never got to go to a race meeting because every time there was a kart meeting on to go and do some racing, I had a race meeting on, so that was a bit of a disaster. And in fact, the kart we bought off a little 15-year-old kid who was super enthusiastic and gave us a bit of help and advice and all this sort of stuff. Young bloke by the name of Michael Caruso.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I still have that card. Talk about not selling stuff.
Bowerbird.
Yeah. So still have that. But then, when I finished, Grant was really keen and Joanne was really keen to get him involved and all that kind of stuff, and a bunch of Simon and a bunch of the other guys. So we got an old Formula Ford and said, let's see if you're any good at this. And
he was all right.
We went from there, and
when you could get him past the warm-up lap, he was okay.
Well, a funny thing was Peter Finlay, he did his OLT with Pete. He's a super bloke. In fact, most of the people I know in motorsport are super guys. I only know a couple of deadheads.
He's talking to a couple of them.
No, actually...
He's talking to one. Speak to yourself.
It's more than two. just so we get away from this table. And when he did his OLT, he was only 15. Yeah, 15. And we had one of the things we'd done prior to that was I knew he needed to learn some car control and have some fun, so we bought a one-owner, genuine one-owner, mint condition Chrysler Sigma. And the old bloke owned it, was as straight as a die. It was brand spanking. So part of the deal with Grant was, well, you've got to help do this, you've got to be part of the whole show. So we put like rally tyres on it. We did a whole heap of stuff to it. And we decided we'd run it in motor carners. So him and I would run in motorcarners.
Yeah.
That'd give him, motorcarners are great for car control and slide and all the rest of it. But it'd also give me if I run one day, one run, he runs the next run, I can see how he's going.
Benchmark.
Benchmark.
Yep.
And, of course, that didn't take very long at all till he just flogged me. And
is that a period of your life when you know that you could always outdo your kids in anything you did, like run into the car and all that? Is that the transition where you realise you're getting old, was when they're starting to beat you?
It was probably a bit later than that, but the bit, strangely enough, and this probably, I don't know what this will sound like, but when he did eventually start driving the cars or even got his licence, I don't know that he drove like a maniac, but he drove a lot more adventurously than I would on the road.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And I remember thinking, doing the dad thing where, I've got to tell him to slow down. I've got to tell him to do this. I've got to tell him to do that. And at that point, he was more seriously into Formula Ford. And I thought, what I've got to learn to do is shut up and just sit here and not open my mouth and be very scared.
Yes.
Because
I still go through that with my daughter and wife.
Well, what brought me back to that was, once when I was working with Gossie, him and I flew to Adelaide, and we got off the plane, this was back in the Formula 5000 days, and one of the other drivers there, and I'm sorry if this is wrong, Bruce, but I think it was Bruce Allison, I think. And he said, I'll give you a lift to the track. And he had a Renter Golf 1600, the square one.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting in the back seat all the way there thinking, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And him and Gossie are talking about shit, right? I just kept thinking, I'm going to die. And that was in my brain with Grant. And I thought, I don't know whether I was ever any good at the race car stuff or I was too conservative or whatever it was. Yeah. But I thought if he's ever going to be one of these top guys, he has to be like that. So I learned to sit there and shut up and just be very scared.
Just accept you might die.
And go very white.
Yes. So we had the Sigma thing, and he then went and got his licence with OLT with Peter Finlay, but he didn't have a road licence. And so Pete said, look, he's really, really good, but he can't heel and tow. And I said, well, it's probably because he's got a licence. And he said, well, we'll put him through, but you got to tell me as a gentleman and a fellow OLT person that you're going to teach him how to heel and tow and all the rest of it. And it's like, no, that's right. But the next day, we also then did with Peter this Formula Ford course. And Grant was, straight away, it's like proper race car. All of a sudden, like, slow down, Grant, you're going too fast. Then that continued on to, we were doing a test day not long after that with our Formula Ford at Wakefield Park, and one of the guys who was helping us, very experienced supercar engineer, was looking at the data and he said, his gear changes are amazing. They're one of the fastest gear changes I've seen, like, I don't know what he's doing, it's brilliant. The rest of it was a bit patchy, but gear changes were good. So when he came in, I said to him, and this is a little bit of, mini bike dad, I suppose. I said to him, how do you change gears? I said, like, do you, just run it up the rev limiter and bump it and pull the stick, or do you just off the throttle, or do you flick the clutch, or, you got to do something to unload the dog in a dog box to get it out. And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, are you having a little lift, or, whatever? Apparently your gear changes are lightning fast. He said, I don't do any of that. Well, so you must be doing something, because it won't come out of gear. He said, if you pull hard enough on the gear stick, it will. And, of course, if you watch any of the in-car footage which you've got of him, regularly people put up, that thing got a sequential. Yeah. And it's a H pattern. Yeah. He's got that bit nailed.
He's just going hard at it, yeah. He's good. He knows
so we just went from there with Formula Ford. And, I remember once we went to Adelaide, it must have been for the Clipsal.
It would have been.
Yeah, it would have been Clipsal, would have been after that. And we're picking up the rent-a-car, and I think it was four of us or something, and the nice young lady's like, oh, yeah, and who's your driver, and it's, I am. And
That was only recently, wasn't it?
They'll get back.
He was on his P plates, and she said, "Well, any of the drivers, you can't drive on P plates." And he goes, "I'm on P plates," and she goes, "Well, you can't drive the rent a car." It's like, "But I'm the race car driver."
I'm the one who races. Oh dear. No, and he's had a good career. We'll have to get Grant on and have a chat to him about what he's done. Cause
and when you do, ask him about his Juan Manuel Fangio jumper.
Yeah. No, he's got some good stories too. But you also you've got the Shrike now, which is one of your cars. You ran that back when it raced.
Yep.
When was that period?
So the car was built in late '88, early '99.
Yep.
And I drove it in 89.
Yep.
It was in the first season of Formula Holden.
So you were running that alongside the BMW then?
Yeah. Okay. So it was one of those things that it kind of all happened at once. We ended up with the BMWs, and I'd been talking to the TAFE guys about running the Shrike because that was a natural step up from Formula 2. And sort of virtually then, got the BMWs, that deal come together, and a week later the Shrike guys rang me and said, "So you better get over here and test drive this car." And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
In for a penny, in for a pound.
Yeah. Well, as PB used to always say, take a big mouthful and chew like
crazy. And in I guess the story of your motorsport career, none of it's very, what you would say, in some regards, even logical, like stepping of how it works, because that car itself has an incredibly crazy history of how it actually came together. Like they managed to get hold of design prints from certain large F1 teams, which if you see the car, you can tell where certain bits came from. They managed to get government funding out of nowhere for a race team. That how do you manage to do that even today, let alone back then? That's
an incredible story, and it's a story that is probably a separate story by itself and how it should be told, But Ted Nowak, the guy who put that deal together, it's beyond legendary. I mean, it's one thing to build, which was pretty much state-of-the-art Formula 1 car of the day in a TAFE college in Adelaide. That in itself is amazing. But the fact that he conned the whole TAFE organisation into setting up a school, they set up composites, they set up dynos, they set up all this stuff to make this car. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But then he went and conned the government into paying for it. That's the third level of amazement. The fourth level of amazement was when he said, "Well, I need a good design." And back then, Formula 1 was in Adelaide, so he went to a bunch of the Formula 1 teams and said, "We're a school, will you help us?" And they all said yes.
Yeah. It's amazing when you stand there and look at that car, because you can be like, "Oh yeah, that's from this team, and that's obviously harks back to that team," because you can see the elements in the design that he was able to do. All that is pretty. And for people who don't know, that's well before Formula SAE or anything like that was a thing.
It wasn't even thought of.
He just basically trailblazed it.
May have well been part of that.
Yeah.
But he'd also got the chief designers from the F1 teams to pop over to the TAFE and do a few lectures while they were here for the students.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And of course, that was one of 4 cars. Well, really 3. One was rebuilt, wasn't it?
So no, there were 4 cars built, and there was enough componentry for a 5th car, but that ended up being spare parts.
Yeah, my understanding was that the first car was a shorter wheelbase than the others, but then was lengthened later on.
No, I don't think it was lengthened.
I was talking to Ian Richards about it after we did a story on it for the Race Talk, and he mentioned he didn't like it. The car, he had the short wheelbase one to run demo laps at Adelaide, I think.
Correct,
it was.
yes.
And he wasn't very complimentary of it.
I don't know how he ever fitted in it, because how that come about was when we actually went for that test day that I just mentioned to Malala with Chassis 001, Arthur Abrahams and I were going to drive the 2 cars.
Yeah.
And Arthur's not overly tall, and he's more of a smaller build. And he was okay in the car, but I jumped in the car to go for my very first drive, and it's like, fellas, how am I going to drive this? And I just couldn't fit in it. It was just too small. So Richo's bigger than me. God, no, he must have rolled himself up in a ball to get in there,
I wonder he wasn't complimentary about it.
So the long story short, and I didn't know if they have changed it. I never knew that. They would have to retub
was
it.
that the first one was lengthened.
Yeah, okay. Well, it was the actual tub they lengthened. So that's a pretty big job. You probably have to retub it to do that. But yeah, they lengthened the tub 2 inches, so it's 2 inches longer.
Yeah, well.
Because there is a bit of a movement to get these cars out and not running, like, obviously eventually to run in a historic series on their own, but at the moment they're running with Formula 5000 and whatever else.
Yeah, it's just what they call Q&R, which is that era. There's a lot of cars being restored at the moment. It's one of those things that it's only a couple of years that, they've been eligible for historic.
Yep. And it's only the early ones, isn't it?
No, we're up to the second group now, so they've just come in
this year, wasn't it?
This year or last year, but with COVID, who cares? Nothing's happened anyway. So the first 2 generations of cars are now in, and it's basically the cut-off at the moment is the carbon cars that got the step up for the feet are not in yet.
Right.
So where you've got a carbon tub that's kind of an aluminium copy, they're in. Duncan McKellar's got Greg Murphy's car, which he run at Phillip Island, that he's done an amazing restoration of. It's a work of art. So that's another really, really good car that's out. Peter Jones, Harry's dad, I think has got Mark Webber's car. Yeah,
and he's also bought the Duncan McKellar McLaren, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, they kind of swap cars around because they're mates. But so that's another really good car that's almost restored. So there's a lot of cars coming through.
There's one that races in Formula Libre at the moment, Doug Barry's car.
Yep.
That's a Reynard 92D, I think, from memory.
The other car that ran only in terms of just for a few demo laps at Malala when we were recently there is the Hunter Holden car. It's just been finished restored.
Adam Kaplan's.
Adam's car.
Yep. He's done it again.
Should have turned it off before, shouldn't I?
You're all right. When you're the guest, I think you can get away with it.
So that's Adam's car, and it's now just been fully restored. So that's another one. So, yeah, there's, a few of them coming through. I think, I'm going to have a wild guess because Rowan Carrick will probably correct me on this because he's the
guru.
He's the dad of Formula Holden.
Yep.
I think there's probably something like about 40 cars around that can run in the category. There's quite a lot. Yeah. And interestingly, probably because they couldn't be broken up for many things, unlike, say, Formula 5000 was, most of them have stayed as cars that are
and a lot of them came from F3000 anyway, didn't they? It just got re-engined.
So where are they running next? Because you guys ran Malala. What's next on the agenda?
Well, pretty much
Motorsport Park.
Yeah,
on weekend.
That's right. Sydney Motorsport Park. We're not running there simply because we spent sort of almost 2 months on the road going to Phillip Island and Malala and all the rest of it.
You'll have a role there anyway, won't you?
Yeah, I'll be there with Heritage Touring Cars as their mum, I guess.
And you're also taking on the role at Supersports as well these days.
Correct. Supersports I don't think are at the historic meeting, but
no.
I don't know. I
think you'll be there a fortnight later for them though, the night meeting.
It just seems now... I never set out to do this in any way because my motivation for being involved in driving standards is because I could never afford to crash my car and take it home and fix it. And when you did, it was just such a miserable feeling. Like you just sort of went home and you were depressed for a week thinking, I don't even want to go and look at it,
Yeah.
And I guess that, so my whole view about the driving standards thing is based on that, that let's all go and race, have a ball, because the feeling you get, especially at a club or less, it's a different story, in supercars, if I brought the supercar, or even in the BMW days at Oran Park, if I brought it back to the pits and it still had the driver's mirror on it, there was a question asked about why I wasn't trying.
Why were you pussyfooting around
Yeah.
out there?
But when you're at sort of club or especially the historic level with heritage touring cars, the feeling you get from going out and having a great close race with your mate, probably only at 9/10ths, and coming back in like you're talking about at the pub for a month.
Yeah. Yeah.
The feeling you get when you get towed back in because you're taking the front off it is not the opposite. It's something far beyond whatever the opposite is, you know. It's devastating. So, you know, I sort of took on the role with that view that let's not crash the cars, and especially, you know, historic cars, heritage cars. I don't own them. Those guys don't own them. You're just the current custodian.
Yeah.
Because in 100 years, when we've all fallen off our perches, someone will own that car.
Yeah.
It's a bit like owning the Mona Lisa, you know.
Yeah.
You don't own it. It's just you're the current custodian. So that, for some reason, and maybe just a lot of experience driving race cars of, you know, lower class, upper class, middle class, whatever you, it's put me in pretty good stead. And now what's tending to happen is, for some reason, whenever a category gets a bit of a problem with driving standards or, you know, a few people being silly, apparently I'm the go-to man at the moment.
I guess we've been given the rap signal from a long chat with Peter.
Yeah.
The producer and director.
Producer behind the scenes. Thank you
I
for
can
your
make
time
more stuff
today.
up.
Yeah. No, I think it'll definitely be. It's a couple of episodes that people have watched through to get to this point. But thank you for coming in, and
my pleasure.
We've got to come by and do some more filming of the Shrike after our little issues earlier on. But it's been great to have you on the show. And thanks, Garry.
Yeah, no, thanks. Been a pleasure. Thanks very much, fellas. It's A, hopefully it's entertaining.
Yep.
B, hopefully people learn something.
Yep.
Because I'm always happy to share.
Yeah.
It's a bit like the DSO stuff.
Yeah.
You know, motorsport's been good to me. I've learned a lot. I've had a lot of fun. And if I can pass some of that along so the next generation have some fun, great.
That's it. Well, thank you, and hopefully we keep enjoying it for many years yet.